Hello, cats and kittens. Orewa Jose Yoroshko. I'm back in the Crisis Corner with a commentary on Taika Waititi's statements regarding his work on the Thor series. First of all, I have a mixed opinion of the Thor series. It's kind of a mixed bag for me. Going back to the first one, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a little bit too grounded with the Earth stuff, but on the whole, I thought it was well executed. I enjoyed it. Then you get to Thor Dark World. I had a lot of people didn't like it, some for various reasons. I like the fact that it was more cosmic than Thor. It had a bigger scale. It played on a bigger stage, but at the same time, they wasted, I thought, what could have been a couple of pretty good villains. And it was a little erratic, a little sloppy in some places, but I still enjoyed it. I don't know, it wasn't an improvement on the first necessarily, but it still wasn't bad. I thought it was okay. I have a great deal of resentment for the work that Taika Waititi did on the Thor series. See, I was never a great fan necessarily of the Thor comics. I more or less came up on two heroes essentially in Marvel. I cut my teeth on Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And I didn't read a whole lot of Thor. However, I did have a great deal of affection for Walt Simonson's run on Thor, especially his Ragnarok arc. So when I heard that they were doing the Thor Ragnarok movie, naturally I was excited. Thor Love and Thunder, this cemented my resentment with Taika Waititi's work on the Thor series. That resentment was only made worse by his statements to the press as brought out in the Hollywood Reporter. And I quote, "You know what? I had no interest in doing one of those films," Waititi said. "It wasn't on my plan for my career as an auteur, but I was poor and I had just had a second child, and I thought, you know what? This would be a great opportunity to feed these children." Now, is this statement bad in and of itself? No. Most people go to work, they go to their jobs to feed their families. This is a business. It's not a religious experience. It's not something sacred or holy. So the man wanted to feed his family by making these films. So be it. I have no problem with that statement at all. But he continues. And Thor, let's face it, it was probably the least popular franchise. I never read Thor comics when I was a kid. It was the comic I'd pick up and be like, ugh. And then I did some research on it. And I read one Thor comic, or 18 pages, or however long they are, and I was still baffled by this character. Okay, so not being a fan of the character is not necessarily a problem either. The same as wanting to feed your family is not a problem. You don't have to necessarily be a fan of the work that you have to produce. It would help, but it's not necessarily the case. My issue comes up with his research into the character. He did not deem it necessary to dig any further than the surface to get to try to understand the character. I take issue with that. That's an issue of professionalism. Maybe you don't like the character. It is what it is. But can you at least have the professionalism to get an understanding of the character so that you can produce for the fans of that character? That's where I take issue with Taika Waititi. So I blame him in part for the debacle that were his two films. But let's continue. Later during the discussion, he states this. Waititi said he felt like he was asked to direct the Thor films because there was no place left to go with that. I thought Well, if they've called me in, it's really the bottom of the barrel, adding that fans initially hated that I signed on for this one. Now, again, no place left to go with it. Now, is the saying that Thor was the least of the three major stable characters of the MCU: Cap, Thor, and Iron Man? Was he the least of those? Yes. At the time he picks up directing after Dark World, there's no place left to go. Well, he had Ragnarok sitting on his lap. He had the Gore the God Butcher run from Jason Aaron. So how can he say that there was no place left to go? Again, I take issue with that. The man did not dig deep enough or have enough interest to take the source material and produce something that the fans would like. However, I do not think the blame lies solely with Taika Waititi. I believe the blame lies with the process of producing those films and the hiring process for the directors and creative staff. For instance, the initial hiring I thought was inspired. Kenneth Branagh, excellent choice. Had 13 feature film nomination, 13 feature films under his belt as a director, 18 Golden Globe nominations, and one Golden Globe win. He directed films such as Dead Again, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Henry V, which personally is my favorite Shakespearean adaptation, and various others. Note Branagh's comments on the challenges of bringing Asgard and the modern world together in the film and contrast those with Taika Waititi's statements. Inspired by the comic book world both pictorially and compositionally at once, we tried to find a way to make a virtue and celebration of the distinction between the worlds that exist in the film, but absolutely make them live in the same world. It's about finding the framing style, the color palette, finding the texture, and the amount of camera movement that helps celebrate and express the differences and the distinctions in those worlds. If it succeeds, it will mark this film as different. The combination of the primitive and the sophisticated, the ancient and the modern, I think that potentially is the exciting fusion, the exciting tension in the film. These statements, just a director speaking about the challenges of making the film, bringing that comic book adaptation to life, sounds like a professional who is engaged in his work. Again, Kenneth Branagh was an inspired hire. So, why didn't Branagh continue working on the second film? Note this. The Los Angeles Times cited the long commitment necessary for a special effects heavy epic and the pressure to start the script process right away as reasons for Branagh's departure. Although he was initially enthused by the chance to direct the sequel, Branagh noted, it was a long time making the film, and they were too quick for me to get straight back into another. But it was a pleasurable experience, and I am proud, and I am very proud of it. So one aspect of the process of creating the Infinity Saga is that the films had to be rapidly produced. They had to be made basically within 2 years of a trilogy of films within 2 years of each other, and you had to have a director who could be committed to pump those films out on time and get them in. But he had to be dedicated, focused to doing that. Branagh wasn't that guy. That process produced the Infinity Saga. What they achieved again was spectacular. They created a comic book saga, mega crossover, and brought it to life. Branagh just wasn't the guy to bring that home. So they had to move on. However, another aspect of the flaw in the process of making these films was to rear its head as they looked for their next director. Well, the next choice in 2011 was Brian Kirk, zero feature films under his belt. This film would have represented Kirk's first foray into a big budget feature film. Uh, the pros and cons that go with getting a first time director on a big budget film. Well, a pro would be it'd be a big payday for such a director, and that payday would likely ensure a bit of loyalty, especially when it comes to the studio meddling in his making of that film. Uh, the more experienced director would want to have control of his film and would resent such meddling. Not so with a newbie, not so with a guy that's getting his big first payday. So that would be a pro would be that this person, whoever is hired, would be indebted to you and would most likely not buck any type of interference from the studio. The con would be you're handing this dude 150 million or north of that in funds to get the film in, and he has never worked with that level with that big a budget of a film. So there's a level of inexperience that comes with such a huge production, and you're taking a fantastic risk. Ultimately, the point was moot. Brian Kirk fell through the cracks, and the search for a new director continued. Notice the next directorial choice for succeeding Kevin Branagh, Patty Jenkins. Patty Jenkins at the time only had one one feature film under her belt at the time, but that film was Monster, and it got her a Golden Globe nomination. So while she was an up and coming director, she had some momentum going, and she might not have necessarily been open to the tampering and tinkering that Marvel is now famous for. As a matter of fact, let's look at her quote as to why she didn't direct Thor 2. Patty Jenkins, she stated, I've had a great time working with Marvel. We parted ways on good terms, and I look forward to working with them again. Jenkins felt that she could not have made a good film out of Thor 2 because I wasn't the right director. I could have made a good Thor if I could have done the story that I was wanting to do. But I don't think I was the right person to make a great Thor out of the story they wanted. So the tampering and the tinkering drove away the future director of Wonder Woman, who no doubt could have made a pretty good Thor 2. So what were they left with? They turned to Alan Taylor to direct what would be Thor Dark World. Why didn't Taylor continue on to doing Thor 3, uh, which would have been Ragnarok? Note, Taylor expressed dissatisfaction with the finished film and blamed its mixed reception on changes Marvel Studios made during post-production, which he felt conflicted with his creative vision. In 2015, he called working on The Dark World a particularly wrenching experience and said in 2021 that the experience made him hesitant to continue directing. This brings us back to Taika Waititi. At the time of getting the directing job on Thor Ragnarok, he had 4 feature films under his belt. 3 were comedies, 1 was a comedy action adventure. Waititi essentially turned cosmic Norse adventures into a couple of comedy skits, and in the process wasted two fantastic storylines. In the end, it was Marvel's vetting process for hiring directors that let the Thor franchise down. They did not match the right director with the right project, namely one that he believed in. Also, the conveyor belt process of making these films and the constant meddling in post production ensured that they could not get an experienced director who could elevate the films to greater heights. In short, lay down with clowns, get up with jokes. However, as harsh as that may sound, I am not saying that Taika Waititi is not a good director. He is a talented director. He has ability, obviously. Jojo Rabbit, I thought was, I don't know how everybody else thought about it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was a very good movie. Excellent movie, in fact. Reservation Dogs, I thoroughly enjoyed on Hulu. However, I don't think that he was the right creative mind to continue whatever momentum was gained from Thor 1 and 2. He changed Thor from being a noble champion to being a bumbling fool. If the film franchise can be or needs to be resurrected, it's going to be have to be in the hands of a better director, or at least one that is more suited and more interested in making an actual Thor movie. Marvel is going to have to hire a competent director and give that director the authority that he needs to make a film that fits his or her vision, and a vision that is accepted by the masses. Can't make movies for yourself or for your own agenda. You have to give the people what they want, and they have to find a director that will give fans of the IP, fans of Thor, what it is they want. If they don't, expect to see more buffoonery and nonsense that is what we've gotten so far. Thor, Ragnarok, and Thor Love and Thunder. These are just my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did you enjoy Thor Love and Thunder and Thor Ragnarok? Let me know. Otherwise, again, this is simply my opinions. Until next time, out of the Crisis Corner, stay loose.